The New York Heatwave, a story of survival and resilience. The city that never sleeps was awake in a way it had never been before. The sun hung low in the sky, a relentless ball of fury casting an unyielding heat over New York City. The once familiar hum of traffic and chatter was replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional wail of an ambulance struggling through the stifling heat. Asphalt shimmered, and the towering skyscrapers seemed to bend under the weight of the oppressive sun. In Central Park, what little green space remained had turned into a brittle brown expanse. Isabella Alvarez wiped the sweat from her brow, her hand trembling as she adjusted the solar-powered fan clipped to her hat. It was barely noon, yet the temperature had already soared past 110 degrees. Her job, usually a mundane task of cataloguing plant species, had transformed into a desperate search for any sign of life among the parched foliage. She knelt beside a wilted fern, its fronds curled in on themselves like withered fingers. "Hang in there," she whispered, her voice cracking from dehydration. Her water bottle was nearly empty, the precious liquid now a tepid reminder of the city's dwindling resources. Not far away, the East River's once bustling banks were deserted. The heat had driven people indoors, into the cool embrace of air-conditioned buildings, a luxury reserved for those who could afford the skyrocketing electricity costs. Rafael Santos, a firefighter, stood on the edge of the river, staring at the water's unnaturally low levels. The normally strong currents were reduced to a sluggish trickle, exposing the cracked riverbed beneath. Rafael's radio crackled to life, a garbled message coming through. "Fire? Upper East Side? Assist?" He took one last look at the river before sprinting towards the fire truck parked nearby. The fires had become a daily occurrence, ignited by the scorching heat and the city's dry, brittle infrastructure. Buildings that had stood for a century or more now threatened to become pyres in the urban wasteland. Across town, in a sweltering apartment in Harlem, Maria Rodriguez fanned her infant son with a piece of cardboard, praying for a breeze that never came. The heat wave had rendered the city's power grid unstable, leading to rolling blackouts that left millions without electricity for hours at a time. Her husband, Javier, was out scouring the neighborhood for ice, a precious commodity now worth its weight in gold. Maria glanced at the small, battery-powered radio on the kitchen counter. The voice of the mayor crackled through the static, announcing new measures to combat the crisis. Cooling centres were being set up in public buildings, and bottled water distribution points were established at key locations. But Maria knew these efforts were merely band-aids on a gaping wound. In Times Square, the giant LED billboards that once bathed the area in vibrant colours now displayed warnings and emergency information. The iconic crossroads of the world was almost unrecognisable, with makeshift tents and shaded areas set up to provide temporary relief for those caught outside. Among the few who braved the heat was Tom, a street performer whose guitar case lay open, empty except for a few crumpled dollar bills. He strummed his guitar, the notes sounding warped and distant in the heavy air. Sweat poured down his face, but he played on, a defiant smile on his lips. For Tom, music was a way to fight back against the despair that hung over the city like a shroud. Suddenly, the ground beneath Tom's feet trembled. He stopped playing, looking around as people began to murmur in fear. The tremor was brief, but it left a lingering sense of unease. Earthquakes were rare in New York, but climate change had brought about unpredictable and extreme geological shifts. Isabella felt the tremor too, her hand instinctively reaching for a nearby tree for support. She looked up at the sky, the once vibrant blue now a hazy grey from the constant fires. "This can't go on," she muttered, her thoughts echoing the fears of millions. Rafael and his team arrived at the burning building, the heat from the flames blending with the oppressive air to create an almost unbearable environment. He donned his mask and gear, pushing forward through the inferno. The fire roared like a living beast, consuming everything in its path. As evening fell, the temperature showed no signs of dropping. The city lay under a blanket of heat, suffocating and relentless. In her apartment, Maria finally heard Javier's footsteps at the door. He staggered in, a bag of rapidly melting ice in his hands. She took it from him gratefully, pressing a piece to her son's forehead. "We can't stay here," Javier said, his voice hoarse. "We have to find somewhere cooler, somewhere safe." Maria nodded, her eyes filled with determination. They would survive this somehow. They had to. Throughout the city, similar conversations were happening. Families, friends, and strangers banded together, seeking solace in community and shared hope. Despite the relentless heat, despite the fires and the blackouts, there was a sense of resilience that refused to be extinguished. New York City, battered and bruised, stood on the brink. The heat wave was a harbinger of the new reality brought about by climate change. But within the struggle, there was a flicker of hope. The people of the city, united by their hardships, began to forge a path forward, determined to adapt and survive in this altered world.